There is a Solution for That is sponsored by VARC Solutions. VARC Solutions helps small businesses succeed by delivering expert QuickBooks bookkeeping, consulting, quick-based development, and integrated solutions. If you own a small to medium-sized business that uses QuickBooks or QuickBase, the experts at VARC Solutions can help. In business since 1999, with people who care and the knowledge and experience to solve your toughest problems. Visit varcsolutions.com for all your QuickBooks needs. Welcome back to another edition of There's a Solution for That, where we help small businesses succeed by discussing challenging business problems and best-in-class solutions. All right, everyone, welcome to the latest episode of There is a Solution for That. We, as always, have an amazing guest to talk about very interesting topics that we think are going to be super helpful to you. This week, we have Theresa Chilcoat, and she is going to be talking about leadership and the self-awareness trap. So I'm going to let her kind of do her own intro and share a little bit about her background and experience and why we're talking about this today. But Theresa, welcome to the show.
Great. Thank you so much, Brad, for having me on. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. It's definitely one for the ages, and it's definitely very relevant to this time and period in our lives. A little bit about myself. I've been in human resources for over 15 years with an emphasis in employee relations and leadership training. They kind of go hand in hand with employee discipline issues, coaching opportunities. The last 6 years of my career, I spent in healthcare, which has been a real struggle through the pandemic and shortage of staff care. During that, I gathered some really valuable insights, coaching managers, executives, and leadership teams on the importance of self-awareness and how to go about finding that. My last role was with Texas Oncology, and I had 3 direct reports, and I handled over 1,500 different employees throughout the entire state of Texas. So very different markets I worked in, but it gave me a really good opportunity to experience different levels of what employees and managers are struggling in different areas. Through that, I have been writing a book called The Survival Guide to a Toxic Workplace, which is basically from the fact that there are a lot of leaders lack complete self-awareness. So that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy talking about this topic and how important it is to this day.
Well, fantastic. You're not alone, right? In terms of, a lot of folks that we talk to, the one of the biggest reasons why they leave a company is not because of the pay, although it's always important. It's usually because of, my boss, for whatever reason,
Exactly.
we don't connect, we don't get along, or like you said, there's some sort of a toxic thing going on there. I've got to imagine you've been in HR for over 15 years. You've probably seen a lot of changes over the last 15 years,
Yes.
not just in terms of business and the economy, but the merging of these generations that are coming up through the workforce, right? And there's different expectations and different feelings and different motivations. So yeah, both sides, right? The employees and also the managers. What have you seen that's maybe one of the biggest challenges that you've seen within the HR area?
Yeah, so as the younger generations join the workforce, there's a lot of challenges. And one of my thesis I did for my master's in strategic human resources was on the challenges of employee engagement for millennials and Gen Z. They are very, very different. They expect high engagement, frequent feedback from their managers, but we're seeing a course change where managers are spending less and less time talking to their employees. And that's why, especially before and during the pandemic, there was such a great emphasis on the great resignation. Now we're seeing a great emphasis on the great detachment, which means the market has gotten more volatile with the employees. It's an employer market. So employees are staying, but they're absolutely disconnected from their roles. They're literally just showing up, keeping the chair warm, and the managers don't understand why their employees are so disconnected. And one of the reasons is a lack of self-awareness.
Right. Well, On that topic, it's like the first time I ever had somebody mention the words quiet quitting, I was like,
Yeah,
what? What do you mean? What is that? What is that? So so I think that's in line exactly with what you're talking about in terms
exactly.
of engagement, right?
Yes, and that was the first trend, was a quiet quitting. Now, so quitting in the terms of they're showing up, they're doing the bare minimum. Now they are indifferent, which is even worse because
Mm,
as a manager, you have a larger struggle trying to bring somebody back, and they're more likely to be resistant to any change or any topics that would be, you would think would be enticing to them. They're just so checked out, they just don't even care. They're literally just there to collect a paycheck.
yeah, and I mean, that's so frustrating for everybody, right? Because
Yes,
a lot of the businesses that we talk to, they're desperate for good people, right? I mean, they're
yes,
uh, having a really hard time finding and keeping good people, and so it's a delicate balance between, how do you find good people that aren't even inclined to go into that kind of quiet quitting, disengaged mode, but also then, even if you've got good ones, it's like, how do you keep them good? So it's definitely an ongoing challenge for every single business, which is why I wanted you to kind of
yeah,
come onto the show and talk about it. So let's go in a little bit deeper into some of the specifics. I know that like one of the things that we had talked about briefly before was especially in terms of leaders, right, is as a
yes.
leader grows in power, how that maybe inversely correlates to self-awareness. So maybe tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things during my research I really found is the higher up a manager or a leader rises within an organization, the more likely they're going to have less honest feedback from their peers, from their managers, their direct reports. They end up surrounding themselves almost with people that are what we call groupthink. They feel resistant to mention they don't agree with something out of fear of their career or fear of looking like they are going against what everybody is saying. And when you become so isolated from understanding how your behaviors and actions affect others, then you become more likely to think that your skills and abilities are exaggerated in their ability because you have nobody that's giving you any feedback to say, hey, this is not, what you're doing, approaching this is not in the best interest for your direct reports, or your manager is not giving you any feedback because maybe your manager is just as buried as you are. So that's the trap, is a lot of people, which is the ironic part, is if you ask everybody, majority of people, do you think you're self-aware? They'll say yes.
Of course.
But yeah, but
Completely.
Asha Urich, who's a researcher on self-awareness, she found that only 10 to 15% of people actually do have self-awareness. So that's how much of a disconnect it is. And that's why it's such a trap, is that you have leaders that really believe they're great at self-awareness internally and externally, but they're really lacking true feedback of how their behaviors are affecting others.
Well, this is fascinating as always, and
Yeah,
it's like I just think about my career, right, and some of the really big lessons that I've learned as a leader, when I've been an employee on the employee side versus a leader on the owner side. Um, there's so many ways to mess it up, quite frankly. Um, but I know, like, I personally have had to go out of my way to get feedback, and seek out people that have other opinions. Like when I built our leadership team here, I didn't want everybody that thought the same, looked the same, talked the same. I wanted people that thought differently than me, not because I want an argument every time have
yeah,
hey, let's go do something and have everybody going, no, let's not. I want agreeable people. But at the same time, I want people that have their own mind to be able to share truly how they feel and what they think, because I think that's when you get the best ideas, is when you've got
exactly.
other people contributing. But let me ask you this, like, so when you say, hey, I've got a leader that maybe is less self-aware, um, is that partly the leader intentionally excluding themselves or isolating themselves, or is it partly their team filtering information, or is it a little bit about?
It's very complex, and it's all of the things that you said. It could depend on the person that they're not getting any feedback. But like you mentioned, like you proactively looked for that. A lot of leaders don't think in those terms like, hey, I need to get feedback to better myself and my personal and professional development. A lot of people think they get to a certain level within an organization and they've learned everything that they need to. But as people evolve, the more isolated you become and people agree more and more with you, it's just human nature to think, oh, they agree with me. But if nobody's going to say anything, nobody's going to be any the wiser unless you are proactively looking for those opportunities to have someone speak up. And those opportunities are not usually something that's ingrained in the culture of organizations.
Right. Well, I know, it's a big challenge, and we've all gotta face it head on and work on it. So you mentioned trap. So like the self-awareness trap. Can you tell us a little bit more about like what when you say trap, like what does that mean?
A trap in the fact that it's something you stumble upon in the fact that you don't realize you're in it until you're in it. What you don't know, you don't know. So in a trap in the sense that you're not, usually what happens, something trips them up to where they finally realize it. Something catastrophic happens, like there's a harassment claim or a lawsuit or something that brings everything to light that most people are like, well, why didn't this person know what was going on? Or why didn't this person be aware? And then this person's totally caught off guard. They're like, nobody told me. So that's how it's a trap, is that there's so many variables that create this perfect storm. Unless you're proactively looking for feedback, you're
Mhm.
not going to get your direct reports aren't going to give it to you. Your manager more than likely is not in the position because they don't work with you a lot. The best way to get feedback is either 360 reviews, or we call a skip level review, where meetings where your executive would be having conversations with their direct reports. So you're skipping over the manager, and that executive is taking the time to meet with the direct reports to get honest feedback on how their manager and their perception of what they're doing and how they're managing them. But most people are not doing something that proactive.
Yeah, no, true. I think I'm again. I hate to like keep saying, oh, but what about me and my experience? Because it's like it's not about me, right? It's about what we're all doing better. But
Yeah,
I think I'm a little bit unique in this space because I think I've probably personally done about five 360-degree feedbacks in my career, which
yeah,
I know is an outlier. I mean, I know I'm not normal.
yes,
Okay.
yeah,
Like I have sought it out, and I mean, once for sure, it was definitely me not seeking it out. I was being told that this needed to happen earlier in my career when I was not a very good
yeah,
people person at all. And it was very eye-opening to get the feedback. But since then, I really have sought it out because it's like if you're not asking, you're not going to get it. And if it's not anonymous, people are afraid.
yes,
They fear repercussions. They feel like they just can't be truthful. And so, I mean, I think there's always part of that, no matter what you do. But those types of feedback models that you're talking about are, in
yeah.
my opinion, crucial, not just for the top leader, but also the leadership team and people at any level that's managing someone else. So very, very good stuff. So why is this whole self-importance, not self-importance, but why is this whole self-awareness thing so important?
Well, if you look at our current, just the overall workplace right now, it's very volatile, it's very dysfunctional, downright toxic in some environments, to where that's all about leadership lacking self-awareness, not
Yeah.
understanding employees' needs, or wanting to take the time to get to know what their employees do. A lot of managers manage through a broad brushstroke, not realizing that each person is going to respond differently. And that's not just generational. You have extroverts, introverts, you have people that are on the spectrum, you have people that have neurodiverse. But right now there's been a push towards just hiring those that you know and like,
So you create a very small-minded and very small in the sense that there's not a lot of diversity of what types of people show up. And it is proven study after study that any organization that has a diverse workforce is more productive and more profitable than somebody that hires a group of like-minded individuals. You're just not going to see the ability of creativity. You're not going to see the challenging, those conversations that you can have are open, a safe place to speak up, a safe place to really expand who you are. So those are the challenges when you lack self-awareness as a manager, is that you have to be able to put yourself last, in the sense that people first, your direct reports first, and take 100% accountability. If somebody is failing, that it's not that person that's failing, it's you failing as a manager.
Interesting stuff. Again, I mean, this is just so right on point. One of the things that I feel like I've learned over time, and probably have to keep relearning, is more than I think I do, which is that this is not just a one-time thing, right? It's like asking for feedback or getting feedback is not something you just get once.
Yeah.
Because people change, lives change, everybody's got stuff at home, they got stuff with family, there's especially as we're getting older, parents are aging and getting health concerns. I mean, there's just so many factors that impact our people every day, and some of it has to do with work, but there's a lot of things that don't have to do with work, but those are real things that happen every day. And so I know it's probably easy for a leader to be able to say, well, I asked them, once, and I got
Yeah.
it, or they told me once and everything was fine. Right. But when you think about self-awareness, what type of cadence, do you recommend in terms of getting that frequent or recurring feedback?
Well, as a manager, it's something that you have to be very proactive, like you mentioned. It's something that you have, especially right now. This is the first time in our history we have 5 generations in the workforce at the same time. So as your team evolves, as your team changes, you have to be more aware of how each person is needing a different part of you in response of how you treat that person. So that's why your self-awareness has to be even more enhanced. I mean, when you had 2 or 3 generations in a workforce, it was easy. You knew that this generation, they don't need a lot of hand-holding. Well, the younger generation, they need a lot of hand-holding in the sense they want feedback, they want positive, constructive, they want to know the why. They want to know why we're doing what we're doing. They want to be engaged. They want to have purpose. This is very, very different. So if you're not keeping up on your self-awareness of how things are changing externally and internally, that's when you get tripped up, and then you find yourself trapped in this environment that I'm good, I don't need to learn anything else, I got it all going on. But then we are changing so rapidly and evolving with technology and the work environment. You just have to be on top of it, and that means always remembering that, am I checking myself? Am I being honest with my feelings? Have I developed a bias I'm not aware of? Just things that we don't think about because we get so caught up in our work environment that it takes time to self-reflect, and that means to slow down. And a lot of managers don't give themselves that opportunity.
Well, as you're describing that, to in one sense, it feels a little bit exhausting, right? It's like,
It is, yes.
keeping up with and maintaining. It's like, I mean, starting it's one thing, but keeping up with it and maintaining it seems like it's just, oh my gosh, this is exhausting. It's like I already have a day job, and now I've got to devote more and more of my time to managing or working with the people on my team, which it sounds a little cold to say that, but I mean, I think it's true, right? I mean, we're all busy, right? We all have a lot of work in front of us on our plates, and so trying to take time out of our days consistently to check in with our people seems like that's more and more difficult these days. So tell me, like, self-awareness is one component, but I know, like, this whole concept of regulating your emotions is another part of that. So how does that play into this leadership self-awareness trap?
Without self-awareness, you cannot self-regulate your emotions, because you have to be able to identify your emotions and what you're feeling.
And our society is notorious for don't deal with your emotions, suck it up, you're just making something out of nothing. And that goes back to the mental health issues. But emotions are a very, very natural part of who we are as humans. And they start on a subconscious level and they come up when we're feeling something. But most people feel that they're bad, which emotions are not bad. They are just what they are.
Right.
And acknowledging when they come up is part of self-regulation. So if you're not acknowledging in them and trying to stuff them back down or avoid them, that's when things you either blow up or you internalize, and then you start having health issues because you're not properly expressing them. And a lot of people think that I'll just deal with it later, but then that just perpetuates this cycle where you are waiting, you're literally becoming a ticking time bomb where you're going to go off because you can't stuff, your body will not allow you to stuff emotions indefinitely. There will be a break at some point in time.
Yeah, well, and true, right? It's like, I need to be able to have so when my wife comes home and she's venting, right? It's like
Yeah.
she needs to
Yes,
be able to
exactly.
share and get some of this
Yes.
stuff off of her brain so that she can get get the words out and get the emotions out so that she can calm down and hopefully re-engage or kind of like start a brand new day without
Yeah.
this weight on her shoulder all the time. So I know we oftentimes do need a way to release that.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting you talk about this because like in my past, like you spent a lot of time in HR. I've spent some time kind of in the coaching space, right? Where
Yes.
I've talked to people, and I've talked to business leaders, and one of the there's a few specific instances that I recall, and one was this guy that was working in a very toxic environment where a boss would walk in and of course everybody got quiet.
Yeah.
The boss would walk in and everybody was on pins and needles because they weren't sure what they were going to get today. But and I think we've all heard some of those stories, but what was even worse in this particular case was this guy was a rageaholic as well. So he
Yeah.
wasn't just moody, right?
Yeah.
He was verbally violent. He was
Yeah.
ridiculing people, verbally yelling and screaming in the audience in the office space. And so obviously he needs a big dose of self-awareness. But to your point, you've got this other person who's the recipient of some of that abuse, and how do they deal with that, right?
Yeah.
How do they deal with a toxic environment where the boss isn't regulating their emotions? They probably
Yeah.
aren't fully equipped to regulate the emotions that they're having.
That's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is that there's 4 steps that I created to help people manage, because I swear what you just described was a boss I worked with, and she was so volatile. I never knew what was going to happen when she came out of her office. And
Yeah.
I took it personally for a very long time, but I developed these steps to, realize that my self-awareness is that I cannot be reacting to her, because this is not on me. Like, this is her baggage, this is her problem, but I'm not going to own it. So that's one of the steps that I talk about. And then also surrendering to the situation where I don't have any control over this person's behavior. I can only control mine. And that's what's really crucial when somebody's in a toxic environment, is recognizing when they are at a point where I don't have to own this. This is not for me to own. And that's one of the biggest challenges, is when you're in it, it's very difficult to have perspective. But that's why I wanted to write the book, is to help people feel like they feel empowered, and that you don't have to feel like you don't have a choice. Like, you don't have to put up the behavior until you decide what you want to do.
Right. Well, let's shift the gears here just for a second, because, so again, I think all of us have worked in those type of environments before. It's really, really hard, I think, to have a boss, a leader that has it all together, because we're all human. We're all, imperfect in many ways. Children in terms of
Yeah.
our ability to manage our emotions. But it sounds like I mean, a lot of times the person that really needs to hear that message is the leader. So how do you
Yeah.
get through to the leader that this is important? How do you get through to the manager that this is worth taking a serious look at and reflecting and probably getting some help too?
Yeah.
That's the biggest challenge, is finding leadership that wants to be, first of all, you have to have somebody that has some self-awareness to begin with and recognize the importance of working on it. And as a team, like that they understand the benefit of it. They understand that people are more productive. The managers are going to be more engaging with their employees. They reap what they sow. But that's part of the challenge. Our culture, especially within a lot of organizations, we don't encourage that because it's not a bottom line on a spreadsheet. That's not a cost item that you can justify. We need to spend time on this training. So it has to be something that a leader buys into at a very high level and understands the importance of it. Because if it's not something that is understanding, because this is a soft skill, this isn't a hard skill, this isn't a financial gain or loss. It has to be something that someone wants to proactively go after as a leader and understand how important it is to the success of their organization.
Yeah, well, I think some of the best organizations out there that do it well are, they're not just running a business, they're not just making money, they're not just serving their clients, but they're also, building a legacy, they're leaving a legacy and impacting the lives of their employees and through them, the families. So it is super important. But at the end of the day, it's time and budget, right? It's like,
Yes.
do I as a leader make time for this? Do I allow my employees time to work on this stuff? Especially if you've got multiple levels of leaders and managers, they need time to dedicate to working on this stuff and professional development. And it's not just about professional development, like working on
Yeah.
certifications, but I mean, it's like you mentioned, the people side of leading others. It takes time. And so you've got to have, I imagine, from the very top,
Yeah.
endorsement and somebody championing this and advocating for this and kind of like I was alluding to before, not just saying, let's go do this once, but let's make this an intentional, proactive thing that we do on a regular, recurring basis. Otherwise, it's just
Yeah.
Band-Aid, it's a short-term fix, right?
And I think that's why leadership coaching, like bringing somebody from the outside, is really beneficial. Like the ones I worked with, especially when I was at Texas Oncology, it wasn't something that I was saying I do coaching. It's something that developed into leadership coaching because I had people seeking out they wanted to talk to me because I was helping them through these processes. And that's when I realized there's a real need, and every organization would benefit from some type of leadership coaching for someone to come out and just sit and talk with someone and work through. Even where I'm working with a aerospace company in Addison right now, and there's two managers. That wasn't my first intention to go out there, but it's just an organic process that happened. And working through one of these managers, we're really working on his self-awareness, and it's helped a lot already. And his team has recognized it, but he's still, because there's internal and external self-awareness. Internal is how we recognize our emotions and how we regulate them. But external is a bigger challenge because a lot of managers don't understand how their behavior affects others. They don't understand their tone, their body language, the choice of words they use. I refer to as like someone just does a drive-by and drops a bomb on somebody and then doesn't understand why the team is upset. That's a lack of external self-awareness.
Right. Well, and so it touches on another related, at least term in my head that I want to get your clarity on, and that's so we've talked about a couple different things: self-awareness, emotional regulation. One of the things that another couple terms that I've heard a lot of people use, and I don't know if the meaning or the understanding is there, but like emotional intelligence, emotional quotient, right?
Yeah.
Are all these kind of the same thing, or is emotional intelligence
Self-awareness.
different?
Yeah.
So self-awareness is one of those key components of emotional intelligence or emotional quotient. It is the critical key because there's social skills, self-regulation, self-awareness. And if you don't have the self-awareness, you're not going to have self-regulation, and you're not going to have the social skills. So those are the soft skills. But when it comes down to it, people don't talk about self-awareness first and foremost, as that is your foundation. And if you don't have that, you have a house of cards, and you're not going to be successful in self-regulation or your social skills. They're just going to be lacking altogether. And that's when you end up with people that are narcissists. Like they have no self-awareness. They are all about themselves. They don't have any desire to care or care how they impact others. They feel that they are immune to having to account for their behavior. If somebody is self-aware, they hold themselves very accountable for their actions, and they recognize the importance of changing their behaviors if necessary. A narcissistic person is not going to do that.
Very true. Very, I mean, it's a problem, right? Because if you are a narcissist, you know, you probably need it the most, but you think
Yes.
you think you're great and perfect and probably don't need it. So,
Yeah.
and you would never,
Yes.
it would never occur to you to get feedback, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Why change what's perfect? You know, uh,
Exactly.
fascinating stuff. I want to ask another question. It's kind of related to this stuff, and maybe it might be a little bit of a rabbit hole to go down. We'll see. I'm curious about, like, how does someone, whether they're aware or not, let's assume that maybe they are kind of self-aware. Um, how does someone that's in maybe that bad headspace, maybe they're in a bad emotional
Yeah.
state, how do they turn off the head talk, right? Because I know a lot of folks that are, you know, they like you said, you know, the boss walks out of the office,
Yeah.
they say something, and now you're in this tailspin, right?
Yeah.
And you know, the next 8 hours of your day, you're talking to yourself and creating this dialogue in your head and making it worse and worse and worse.
Yep.
How do you, what's like one good tip
Yeah.
to help cut that off, maybe?
Yeah.
In the situation I was in, that was toxic. I literally would lock myself in my office, thinking that would be the best way to, keep myself from losing my sanity. But then I decided, like, I need to get out. Like, I need to get outside. Like, I need to remove myself from this space. So I made a point every day during lunch or later in the day, I would at least go outside and get some fresh air and get away from it. And you won't believe how much just 10 to 15 minutes getting away from that environment, especially if you can get outside, get some sunlight, be in some little nature, even if it's just in the parking lot or whatever, can actually help you change your perception of that minute at that time. And then just I focus on it's called the box breath, 4-part breathing, where you breathe, inhale for 4, hold it for 4, exhale for 4, hold it for 4. And that really helps regulate your parasympathetic nervous system. Because when we're stressed, we are out of our minds in the sense that we are in the fight or flight mode. And to bring that down is to do a deep breath, because most people don't breathe deeply anyway. So that actually activates the diaphragm, and the diaphragm stimulates the vagus nerve that runs through our body, which actually brings us down the parasympathetic nervous system. So it helps calm the body down. And so if you're feeling really stressed, more than likely you're shallow breathing, you could be hyperventilating. Remembering to breathe is probably one of the first and foremost, and then get yourself outside, get some different perspective. So you can just kind of reevaluate where you are today. So you're not constantly in that headspace where you're just spinning.
Wow, great stuff. And so it's like change your environment so you can change your state of mind
Exactly.
and hopefully re-engage more positively going forward. I mean, I think, like, when I've gotten myself into those situations where
Yeah.
I'm talking to myself and I'm like, no, I'm grumbling to myself, and if I should have said this, and all these different types of things. I mean, at least for me, sometimes I just have to say, look, that wasn't exactly what happened. That wasn't the conversation.
Yeah.
I'm making it more than it was, and I'm just feeding my own need to be right, right?
Well,
Where,
another thing to take into consideration too is with self-awareness is, am I hungry? Am I tired? Is my willpower tapped out? Am I just like,
yeah,
am I exhausted? Do I need water? When's the last time I had water? Am I overwhelmed with something else that's going on that this is just exacerbating the situation? So those are things too to remember, like, am I reacting because of another circumstance? Or is
mhm.
this reaction really valid to what I'm experiencing right now? And if you can figure out, like, I need to get something to eat, like, I can't remember the last time I ate. When was the last time I had water? When was the last time I got up from my desk? Those are things that can help change your perspective and that mindset too. Is it at the end of the day, maybe I shouldn't be having this conversation with somebody right now. I'm spent, I'm wiped out, like, I just need to reevaluate, and tomorrow is a new day and I will look at this differently. So those are things that help you kind of just do a mental checklist. Am I reacting the way I should be reacting, or am I just way off base because there's some other external factor internally that's happening?
Well, it all goes back to the very beginning, right? Which is the whole thing you're talking
Yeah.
about, which is self-awareness. And if I'm not
Yes.
aware of my sleep, if I'm not aware of my,
Mhm.
hydration, if I'm not aware of, my alertness or my fatigue level, energy level, that kind of stuff,
Yep,
how can I be better in those
exactly.
moments? And it's really, really hard. So, well, let's wrap up this show by
Sure.
maybe kind of like just I always like to leave people with a tip. So let's say that there is a leader listening to this show right now, and maybe they need a little help with self-awareness. Maybe
Yeah.
they need they could benefit their organization by being more self-aware. What's maybe one or two just easy to do short tips, strategies, if you will, to
Yeah.
get on the right road down this path of being more self-aware?
One thing I would say is, everyone, especially in leadership, should have a mentor. If they don't, definitely find one. That's somebody they can be honest with them, and vice versa, that they are somebody that can provide constructive criticism
Mm,
to where the situation is. They
okay.
understand them, somebody that's safe space to be in. More than likely, it's better to have somebody that's not in their department or maybe even their company, so they can really give them a true perspective of what they're going through and what their life is. Another one is, if you really want to know, is at the end of the day, start journaling how you feel and what feelings came up during the day, and see if there's a situation that triggered you, that, kind of evaluate, was that a valid way to respond? Was I, like I mentioned, was I responding because I was hungry, tired? Do I need to eat? Or was there something from the past that emotionally has triggered me, that this person somehow triggers me? So those are some really quick ways to do it. And then also, I offer a free session, 1 hour session, for anyone that wants to work through and see if there's something I can do to help you. I'll give you my information. You can reach me on my cell phone. That's 972-849-3061, or my email is admin@Theresa .com. So that's THERESA, and then Chilcoat is CHILCOAT .com. But definitely, if you're looking to be a great leader, you definitely need to have somebody to provide you feedback.
I love it. I love it. So journaling is one thing, and that doesn't have to be some big, exhaustive,
No.
every 30 minutes kind of thing. It just could be just taking a moment out of your day to reflect what went well, what didn't go well,
Yeah, at the end of the
things
day
like
is
that.
best. Yeah, at the day is best because you're removing yourself from that situation. You can get some space between that time and point, and kind of have a way to reflect on that. You're more of a calm state, and instead of trying to evaluate what you just went through in the moment, it's not going to be objective or helpful in that state. So at the end of the night, when you're giving yourself some space, some time away from the office, and then kind of decompress, and that's a great time to go through it then.
That's awesome. And I really also do love the tip about having a mentor. Not just to have someone that you can share, candidly and objectively, and get, objective feedback back, but having someone that can also play that role of an accountability partner.
Exactly.
Because even if you said, hey, do a journal, if I don't have somebody asking me, did you do your journal today?
Yeah.
Chances are I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
So
No, you're correct.
having a mentor that can also act as an accountability partner, I think would be crucial, especially if you know going into this that you're going to be a challenging patient, so to
Yes,
speak, on
yes.
your own health journey. So Theresa, thanks again for taking the time out of your day to talk to our audience about this, and really appreciate your wisdom and your advice. And hopefully somebody
Thank
will
you,
reach
Brian.
out and
No, I really appreciate your time. It's been a great conversation. I appreciate it.
all right. And for everybody that's
Okay.
watching and listening, hope you got a lot out of this episode, and we will talk to you again next week. There is a Solution for That is produced by VARC Solutions. This episode was produced by Ashley White and Aaron Riley. You can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Watch the video version on youtube.com/TheresaSolutionforThat. Or visit varcsolutions.com/podcast, where you'll find our entire podcast archive, as well as show notes, links to solution providers, and complete transcripts of every episode. If you love the podcast, please leave a review with your comments.